Hello, everybody. How are you doing? I am Dr. Alicia, and I want to welcome everybody to come on in. And today, for Mental Health Monday, I have a very special guest with us, and we're going to have a very critical conversation that piggybacks on what I've been talking about every Sunday night. If you guys know, every Sunday night for my book club called the Healing Haven Book Club, I have been reading this book to everyone, How to Be an Adult in Relationships. It's the subtitle is The 5 Keys to Mindful Loving. And we have been diligently working through this book. We just finished chapter 3 and we're on to chapter 4. And so I've done almost a dozen videos on this book going through it because I really think we of all people really need to understand how to live like a Buddha so that we can not only heal ourselves, but we can heal each other with a lot of the work that we do in terms of how we interact with each other, how we communicate with each other, not like a hurt child, but as an adult who's able to deal with things that's happening with us. So what I'd like to do is I just like to welcome everybody in, and I'm very excited to welcome the author of our book from the book club, Mr. Dr. David Richo, and he is the author of this book, profound work in the field of mindful loving and generational healing, I think. And so this will be a very great transformative discussion. And welcome to the show, Dr. Richo.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me, Alicia. I appreciate it.
It's such an honor to have you here. And I'd like to have some of your insights into what I've been talking about with the Black community in general about breaking generational curses, and in that coming up with a more mindful way of strengthening the family, the Black family. So I want to start by exploring your approach to mindful loving and how it tackles the concepts of being able to interact with each other in a way that's like an adult.
Thank you. By mindful, I mean being able to be fully present with someone. And the only way that can happen is if you're not judging the other person or trying to be one up with them or have any thought in your mind that you're competing with the other person, or certainly not that you're planning to retaliate in some way. And in working with clients over the years, with couples, I've noticed that all of these things happen at times in relationships. And so I thought to myself, well, is there a way to be present so that none of that is happening, and instead you're simply with the other person just as that other person is, rather than as what you're trying to make them into or project onto them. And of course, this would be true for anyone in society. Like, how can I be with people who are different from me in a way that doesn't enact and push my prejudices onto them? So that's what I mean by mindful. It's just here and now, you are you, and I want to be with you as you are, and even mirror back to you whatever feelings you're having.
Yeah, I think that's really inspiring. And I'm just thinking about my daily life and how busy life is for me. And as a college professor, as a therapist, and I have so many things to juggle. To incorporate mindfulness into my day-to-day practices with my loved ones, my children, and my husband. And I think I echo a lot of people when I say it's so tough to stop what I'm doing and to just say, even though the phone is ringing off the hook, people are trying to get a hold of me, to really put my phone down and give my children, my husband, my full undivided attention to be fully present and mindful. There's so many barriers to that. And I think that it stops me from being able to listen. How would you talk to someone, particularly couples, about just taking time out to stop, not judging, not reacting, but being mindful in this busy world that we live in?
Well, one thing that would help is if you could set a time that you both agree to, at a time of the day when you're not getting so many phone calls, like for instance, after dinner, and you really need to like make a date to do this. It won't just happen on its own, and there'll always be something that wants to get in the way. And you just have to be very disciplined and say, no, this is our time, and I'm not going to let anybody else eat into it. It's basically a kind of pause. You might have heard the expression, the mindful pause, Pause. And that mindful pause is, I'm going to let go of all the stresses that are surrounding me right now. Take 3 deep breaths and just pay attention to what I really want to pay attention to. And for instance, that might be your partner at this time that you've set up. It won't just happen automatically, and sometimes it's best to like do it while you're taking a walk rather than just staying at home where the kids are also asking for time. So sometimes you have to kind of leave the premises in order to be able to do this. But it really makes a big difference in the deepening of the intimacy and the respect for an important element in any relationship. I made time for you.
You know, I have to tell you, since COVID, a lot of this has actually happened, and I don't know how everybody else feels. Welcome everybody in the chat. I see MomTube and Rhonda. Rhonda's been in the book club every Sunday night. Hello, everybody. Dennis, welcome everybody. I just want to say I have Mr. David Richo, and he is here. He is the author of the book that I've been talking about for the past couple of months now, How to Be an Adult in Relationships. And today we're talking about one of the big steps is just carving out time in our busy schedules to make our loved ones a priority. And what I want to say is that it's been easier for me to do it with the COVID because we were forced to kind of slow down. And I know COVID and having this shutdown forced a lot of families to start to focus on themselves and start to focus on each other. And a lot of the problems that they were dealing with that they've been avoiding, they now have had to face. But I think what I'm noticing, and I will just talk about my family, is that I really started giving them this because my world has changed. I am now home doing YouTube videos. I teach my courses in an online program now because of COVID. So I am home every day when my kids come home from school. And in reading this book, I have said I block out my calendar from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. I don't take clients, maybe even 5 o'clock. And it is mandatory that every child comes into my office and they sit down and they talk to me. And it's my way of giving them a holding environment of which they can talk about whatever they want, and I don't judge them. Now, the rest of the day, I'm telling them to do their homework, clean their room, put the shoes back. I'm barking orders out at them. And I feel like I can do that because I've sat here and connected with them. So it has just really helped us as a family to just operate better and connect better. And with my husband, we go and we exercise together. So we're killing two birds with one stone. We are taking care of our bodies. Also, while we're going on a run, we're connecting about what's going on with our day. So this whole entire thing, it just kind of solidified some of the things that we've always been doing. And I just love the fact that I've been able to kind of share what's been working with other people and making sure that they have these 5 keys to mindful loving. So, welcome everybody. I have Dr. David Richo here. Y'all know I've been talking about him for quite some time. The How to Be an Adult in Relationships, the 5 keys to mindful loving. I just want to here, let me see if I can find, if you guys want to know when I go live talking about this book, please text the word love, LOVE, to 87948, and you'll get a text message on when we can continue. Dr. Richo, we've made it all the way to chapter 3, through chapter 3. So next Sunday, we're going to start chapter 4, which is called High Romance. So I can't wait to start talking about that. But we have been talking specifically about the 5 keys to mindful loving. And I know you've explained this beautifully before, but for those who are just joining us, let us know what, in your words, in this holding environment and being fully present, because I think all of us need to be mindful in how we speak to each other and interact. But what's guiding that are the 5 keys to mindful loving. Would you mind at least talking about a couple of them? And maybe
sure. Yeah. Well, I can mention all 5. But first of all, I love your phrase, which of course is also in the book, and it's from Winnicott, Dr. D.W. Winnicott, a British child psychiatrist. And he came up with the phrase, the holding environment, which is the household in which you, the child, feel like you're being held safely and being respected as yourself. And one of the ways this can happen is through these 5 A's. And I have it as 5 A's because all the words begin with A. So we come into the world with many needs, and there are 5 that stand out. The first one, obviously, when we're infants, is that we have to have someone be attentive to us. So that's the first A, attentiveness or attention. And this means that 24/7 at first, the parents have to be available, or whoever the caretaker is, to know with a child who can't speak what exactly they're needing in the moment. For instance, do they need to be held? Do they need to be fed? Do they need to be changed? And that's the first A, attentiveness. And the second is to be held with affection. In other words, you feel as if the parents who are physically holding you genuinely care about you and are connected to you. My new definition of love is, which is in the book, is a caring, committed connection. That's how you know you love someone. You care, you're committed, and you remain connected even when you're angry. Third is you value the infant or toddler or child. Now, the word for that is appreciation, which comes from the Latin word price. So I feel you're a pearl of great price. Then when you start to show your own personality characteristics, and any of us who have children know that each child comes in with his own or her own or their own personal traits. the parent has to be okay accepting them. And then finally, when you no longer need your parents so much because now you're going to school or eventually college or leave home, that your parents are on board with that. They're okay with you growing up. They're okay with you moving on. They're not trying to hold you back. They're not trying to make you fulfill their needs. So these same 5 A's, which we come into the world with as needs, carry over into adult life, and they're the exact same needs that describe an intimate relationship. So in an intimate relationship, the partners are giving these 5 A's to one another. You're paying attention to my feelings, my experiences, my wishes, even though you don't have to fulfill them all. You show affection physically. You appreciate me rather than take me for granted. You really value me. You accept me just as I am rather than trying to make me over or reject part of me. And you allow me, even though we're connected, to have my own life, my own friends, and follow my own career rather than trying to control me. So the same 5 A's apply to us all through life, and they provide a picture of what love looks like when you show it. When you show your love, you do it by being attentive, affectionate, appreciative, acceptant, and allowing. So that's where I come up with the 5 A's.
It is so wonderful what you're saying, because like we're all just big babies. We all just want
Good way to put it.
we're just big babies. And
Yes, I feel like that a lot.
here we are. And I look at my couples and they'll just be fighting back and forth sometimes. And I'll say, wait, stop. What is it right now that they could do for you to make you feel that they love you? You know, what is one thing? And you'll be surprised. I said, anything in the world you can ask for, what would it be? And it would be something like, well, I just want them to give me a hug. And I feel like, really, all of this protest, all of this paying this money to come see me, and really, when we boil it all down, you just want your husband to hug you? Like, why can't you ask for it on your own? You paying me to roundabout way. And what I'm finding is that there's so many wounds. Like, so many of us did not get this 5 A's growing up, and Black people in general. Not specifically, but I mean, in general, there's just like ideas about child rearing, and children should be seen and not heard, like these sort of things that are just filtered into our community and really part of our culture that, you know, I've been kind of talking about. This is not who we really are, you know, and this is what we had to become to survive in a lot of ways. And I've just been talking about this, like, what do you do when you can recognize in yourself that I didn't get this? I never was accepted. I never felt accepted. I didn't feel loved. My parents abused me. My parents abandoned me or neglected me. Like how do we recover from this? You know, with not getting the 5 A's. And so we just grow up and we're just big babies, damaged in some sense.
Well, we're never going to get over it if we're still blaming our parents. I think the way through it, which I describe in the book and give you some, you know, practices for doing it, is to grieve what you missed out on. I'm sorry I didn't get this. I feel sad that I didn't get this. I even feel angry that I didn't get this. I'm afraid I'll never get it from a partner. And I'm not going to excuse my parents or blame them.
Right.
It has to be both.
Yes.
I'm not going to excuse, so they're still on the carpet, but I'm also not going to blame and reject them or retaliate against them. that would be missing the whole point, because now you're an adult and you are capable of finding a therapist and working out the issues that are still unsolved and incomplete. And, I know you're helping people do that. And yeah, that's it. It's the pathway of grief that helps us let go of the experiences of abandonment and neglect. And then, of course, you turn around and you become the one who gives the 5 A's to yourself.
Yes.
That's called reparenting. I'm going to pay attention to my feelings, to my body. I'm going to hold myself in a loving way. I'm going to appreciate what I've done in life, even though I have regrets. I'm going to accept myself just as I am. And I'm going to live in accord with my own deepest needs and wishes, rather than those of my parents, the church, the school, my peers, or society, except when any of those enrich my life and make me a better person.
I so promote this. I think that, this whole grieving process I've seen, and it's stuff that I'm seeing online that I don't like. I've seen this sort of thread where people aren't taking control of that and giving it to themselves. But what they do is they look for outside gratification. They look for other people to validate them, or they inflict some of the pain that they experience onto another person. And then when that person, when they project that, when that person speaks up about it, they don't take accountability. So this lack of accountability, I'm starting to see, instead of owning up to how you need to give this to yourself because they're just empty, I'm also seeing this neediness. Look at me. I'm worthy because I have these material things. So they're playing out some of the lack thereof inside by trying to fill it up with things that could never fill it up. And, we've been talking a lot about how you overspend, you have addictions, all of these things that make you incapable of being in a relationship with anybody. So, it gets so messy sometimes that sometimes it's exhausting for me, because it's just difficult to kind of like say, wait, time out. There's some hurt feelings here and we need to care about each other. So this whole mindfulness is very, very difficult to kind of like talk about on online discussions when people just put comments in the chat here and there. So what happens, I guess the question I want to ask you now is, how do we deal with what happens when people aren't able to grieve, aren't able to look at how to reparent themselves, but instead outwardly focus on it outwardly? I'm not the problem. Women are the problem, or, or men are the problem. How do we deal with this?
Blaming would be an escape from doing your personal work.
Yes.
It's all their fault, my parents, or it's all his, her, their fault, my partner or partners. We look outside, and when we do, we also don't get it, that we don't have, the reason we're looking outside is because we don't have the capacity for self-fulfillment and for reasonable, moderate fulfillment from our family, friends, and partners. And then it becomes a bottomless pit.
Yes.
So you can never really get enough. And of course, it's interesting because the thread, to use your word, goes from whatever you can't get enough of, that's what you must have missed out on originally. And so there is a direct connection between addiction and our early childhood and how we, as you said, were often neglected or abandoned. And what that really means is the emotional abandonment, not just physical abandonment. Every time they looked away instead of looked into us when we wanted so much to be heard or wanted so much to have our feelings held, every time they did that, that was itself an abandonment. And it's not as if somebody's going to come along now who will do it all for you. In fact, when you come across as needy, you're not going to attract the healthy people. You're going to attract the other either needy people or people who will take advantage of you, people who will abuse you, who will use you, and maybe to fulfill their own egotistical needs even. So really the pathway into a healthy relationship is first do the work that you still have to do. And we all have that. We all have work to do. I was so surprised when I was doing couples therapy. Now I'm retired from taking new clients or doing couples therapy. But sometimes I would have clients who had an absolutely wonderful childhood. And they weren't hiding anything. I really got it. When they described their childhood, I thought to myself, well, this is a truly healthy childhood, holding environment, 5 A's. And they were sometimes just as messed up as the people who didn't get it. This is mysterious to me. Never figured it out. It's almost as if society itself turns us into needy people at times. Anyway.
What is that? Like,
I don't know. I was going to ask you.
I have no idea. I mean, could it be? I mean, I can't even imagine. Like, what? I mean, well, there's no perfect childhood. We know this. I would say, like, I know I was talking to you about it before. I'm a second generation therapist. So my mom was a therapist. My dad was a therapist. He taught social work. I'm a social worker and I teach at my university. So I grew up with two parents that had advanced degrees in child development, and I had lots of holding environments. And I don't think it wasn't perfect. My parents divorced, so it wasn't like it was a perfect, it wasn't perfect at all. But even I sometimes can get kind of needy. I have to admit, like, I can kind of be whiny to my husband about, pay attention to me. And I'm real hyper vigilant about being rejected. No one likes rejection. So some of this I wouldn't consider it pathological, but there are times when I feel like I just need some love and attention, and I'm comfortable talking about it. So, I'm going to say it because when I was growing up, when I needed attention, I was encouraged to use my words and talk about it. So I articulate it. So I think, like, that's just like a curious thing for me. Like, how does this happen? And I wonder, maybe along the way, people just aren't able to reflect on what's going on with them growing up, that they live in this fantasy world that things were better than they really were. I'm not really certain what happens, but, to be able to grow as a person, it does require me to be in a relationship with someone. And I've learned so much about myself. I've been married, I've been divorced, and I'm married again. And so, but along the way, I've like grown and evolved so much. So maybe there is no wonderful childhood. Maybe there are different ways in which all of us at some point our parents missed the mark. And maybe that's a beautiful thing because that made me want to leave home. I guess if they never missed the mark, I'd be home with my mom all the time. So what are you going to say?
Well, I was going to say that the first noble, what's called the first noble truth in Buddhism, which is a path of wisdom, is ultimately life is unsatisfactory a lot of the time. And when you're trying to make it perfect, you won't succeed because it isn't like that on this planet. And so what you need to be satisfied with is not perfection, but good enough most of the time. If only I had known this years and years ago. Just look for good enough most of the time and make it clear to your partner that that's all I offer. All I can offer is good enough most of the time, or even almost most of the time. So you're going to have to be okay with that. If you're looking for perfection, you're not going to find it here. You're in me, because I'm human, and humans aren't like that.
Yeah, I think it's so funny because in my relationships, you know, I want to feel as if I can listen to a complaint, you know, and then apologize for it. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Now that I've heard what you said, I'm sorry. And you need to be in a relationship where you can say that to another person. You can complain to your partner about something they did, duh. And then the other person needs to apologize. And I don't see enough of that happening in relationships. And I don't see enough apologies. I don't see enough listening. I don't see enough mindfulness. I don't see enough, like, people aren't listening to really hear what someone is saying, just in general. They just want to just respond. And we see that on the eve of the election. We got two political parties that have done zero listening.
And that would be an important thing about choosing a candidate. Good enough most of the time, not perfect.
Boy, let me tell you, tomorrow we're going to have a listening party. We're having a listening party, and I am so hoping I don't want to get too political, but it really is the good. The good is going against the evil, so to speak. In my mind, that's how I can't see it any other way. It's just like, you can't possibly be serious with what you're saying. That's how I feel, not to be political. It's like, I wonder if one particular political candidate is doing everything that they can to just do everything wrong. Just like, how could you deliberately be this way? Like, I just start to wonder, but time will tell. And I guess we'll keep all the political stuff for tomorrow's video, which I will be on tomorrow.
I'm on board with you.
Let's keep it on. But yeah, I mean, I think this is so great. And we just finished chapter 3. But before I go into chapter 3, because it's finding a partner, because a lot of single people out here really tuned in to chapter 3. But before we go into chapter 3, I just want to say hello to everybody here in the chat. Y'all know who I'm talking to. I'm talking to Mr. David Richo. He's Dr. David Richo, and he wrote this book. Now, listen, y'all, I have 21 years of clinical experience. I've been working with families for over 30 years, but David Richo, what do you have, like 50 years experience?
Yes.
So combined today in this video, we got over what? 20 and 50, we got over 70 years of knowledge right here. So y'all are fortunate to be tuned into us today. What else could you do? Is there?
I've forgotten about half of it.
You've forgotten half of it. But
it's a good thing it's in the book.
It's in the book, but it's embedded in who you are. You can't help it. It's dripping from you. But I want to say hello to everybody. Hey, Patricia. Patricia's saying hi to us. And oh, look at this. We have a comment. Umar Johnson says, Dr. Umar Johnson, anyway, says, if your relationship with your mom and dad was hurtful, do not date. Okay, so that's a great.
Until you work on yourself.
Till you work on yourself. So
Yeah.
let's dive into, we've been going into, we just finished chapter 3. And chapter 3 talks about finding a partner. And I enjoyed like this chapter, and I really encouraged even those who are in a relationship to really listen to finding a partner, because you know, it's a lot, it's great, the conversations and the journals. I'm encouraging couples to sit down with each other and complete some of the challenges that you're giving people at the end of every chapter about journals. So when I come on, I tell everybody, get your journals out, because Dr. David Richo is telling us to do this stuff. So I don't know, let's explain a little bit before we close for today, a little bit about finding a partner and how do you know you're ready to look for a partner. You're ready to enter into a relationship, and finding someone else that's ready to hold you, to give you the 5 A's, because not everybody's at a place mentally where they can give the 5 A's.
Well, first of all, it can't go by the pitter patter, you know, the chemical reaction that you're having to the other person. You can enjoy that, and it could be that that's the person for you, but that can't be the way you make the decision. So at first I thought to myself, well, relationships go through 3 basic phases. First, you have the romantic, you know, in love, everything is wonderful. The ego ideal meets the ego ideal. Then soon enough, you go into your conflict stage when you see the shadow side of each other's egos that you didn't even realize was there. And then third is when you make the actual commitment. Now I see you as you really are, and I accept you as you really are, and still want you. And when both of you want each other, that's the time to get married, not when you're in the romantic phase, as most of our parents were when they got married. Then secondly, it has to be that each of you has done at least half of the work to become a healthy person.
Yeah.
And that's where I got the idea of, you know, how to be an adult in relationships. An adult is somebody who has noticed, I have work to do on myself. It's hard for me to accept other people as they are. It's hard for me to pay attention and get out of my own big ego. It's hard for me to accept and to allow, and so forth. And that means I have some work to do on myself. So it takes a lot of humility to be ready for a relationship, and the kind of person you're looking for is the one who has that kind of humility. And we certainly have seen recently, especially during this time of getting ready for the election, what a big ego looks like. And you have to get it that half the country wants that as part of the leadership. And so it does make you wonder how many people out there are really okay with this other approach, in which what you're looking for is not a big ego, but somebody who gives up the ego in order to have a healthy bond with someone else.
Yeah, and you know, that being vulnerable, nothing hurts more than when you lower your guard and you say, for instance, like, you know, I'm very sensitive to rejection. I do not like rejection with my loved ones. I just don't. And I'll tell a story. You know, there was one time I was with my dad, and he didn't do something like I thought he would do, and it made me feel rejected. So I'm very sensitive to rejection. So earlier today, when even with my husband, I'll interrupt him, and then he'll be like, "I'm in the middle of something. What are you doing?" And I'll be like, "You had talked to me like that." And I'll just be like upset, and I'll share that story with him, and I'll be like, "Could you please be a little more gentle with me, because that's a sore spot and I'm working on it." But I just being able to have someone hear this, it's so important. And when you're vulnerable, what I'm seeing is that in the middle of an argument, people will bring it up and use it as a weapon. And I see that so much, to say, well, you're just being sensitive because your mom left you in the store when you were little, and it's those type of things that I think that we need to get away from. It's when you let your guard down and you start sharing things that hurt you. Let's not use this in an argument against another person when you're in this triggery state. I say triggery, but I really mean you're just in this animated state where you're just being reactive and not mindful, but very reactive. And, I just find that that's a little heartbroken, to see that, and that I'm starting to see a lot of that. And maybe when you get too much of those, is that the kind of person you really want to get married to? Someone who's going to throw your past in your face and use that. And I see a lot of men and women women doing that to men, and men doing that to women, using it as weapons. Thank you, Patricia. Patricia is like weapons of mass distribution. Yeah, it's like so terrible. And so those are the things that we have, we've been talking about and trying to get people, to just stop doing that, because that's toxic. Understanding the difference between this is healthy and this is toxic. There is a thing such as your ego getting in the way. That's toxic. Do we want to live in a country that's toxic like that? That looks at groups of people that's dissimilar from yourself and calling them the other and minimizing them and their self-worth, and they got to leave this country, or they're not worthy of, being a natural citizen, going through the process. I mean, these are things that, I have found to just be kind of heartbreaking to observe and to experience and to watch in my community that's so closely tied to me. I don't know if I know I'm talking for a while, but, I was born in Tuskegee, Alabama, ground zero of the Tuskegee experiment, in that hospital. And then I was raised in Gary, Indiana, which the steel mill, we saw the removal of steel mill and the influx of drugs and alcohol in my community. And so there's just so much work that needs to be done. And, that's why I thought your book was just beautiful. It just cuts right through. It's a blueprint of how we now need to start picking up the pieces now and start treating each other this way, whether or not we get the outside validation that we need. But I've said a lot, and I know I said I would just hold you on here for 45 minutes, but I didn't know if you had any parting words, or if you wanted to respond to what I was saying about weaponizing people's vulnerabilities.
I'll say just something briefly. First of all, I'm sorry your heart was broken in some ways. And also keep in mind that all our hearts get broken one way or another. And that's how the light gets through, according to Leonard Cohen. And I think it's such a beautiful way to look at vulnerability. Two kinds of vulnerability. There's the vulnerability of the victim who's just taken advantage of over and over again. We don't want that. That's utter powerlessness. We want the kind of vulnerability that means I'm open to being wounded at times, and I have built up resources so that when it happens, I do make my way through it. And that sounds like what's happened for you. You have found ways to heal that broken heart.
Yeah.
And even become helpful to others who have that same kind of heart.
Yeah, and I do feel like I'm carrying along the tradition that was kind of set with my parents, how they, my dad entered into social work in 1968. 1968. You talk about, he was part of this whole civil rights movement in Chicago, and my mom, all of the things that she's done as a therapist and working together on a lot of things, and how I grew up in a household where we've been trying to heal people, and especially people that have been hurt by some of these things. And it all connects with the political, it connects with historical things. And it's all kind of interesting. On the eve of the election, we're sitting here talking about mindfulness, and who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow night, it is really going to be a wonderful moment in American history about which direction we're going. We're really at a crossroads, because I could not think of two opponents who are diametrically, totally polar opposites, and how this country has been polar opposites. And hopefully all of us as a people, and I really do mean like everybody, I'm still hopeful that we can be mindful tomorrow about how we treat each other, no matter what the outcome is. I just, oh.
That's a good phrase. No matter what the outcome is, I'll find a way to make something of it that will be healing for myself and others.
Yeah. I'm not in favor of this hatred. We've just had enough of it.
No.
But so at least we all of us, y'all, everybody joining us in the chat, we can agree that let's have a mindful response. No matter who wins tomorrow, let's have a mindful response, and let's give each other the 5 A's. I think America needs the 5 A's. America needs to give the 5 A's, and they also need to receive the 5 A's. That is attention, being available. Let's all give each other attention, affection, appreciation, allowance, and most importantly, acceptance. We need to accept each other. Those are the things that I really hope for all of us. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you, everybody in the chat. Patricia, Black Lexicon, Tara, there's our normal hitters. Rhonda, Aisha, I see you, Aisha. Bryn, thank you for bringing up the Omar Johnson quote, being in a relationship. I just want to tell everybody, we're going to start chapter 4 Sunday. We're going to talk about high romance. So y'all tune in. Maybe I'll get my husband to come in here. Yes, Aisha, love always wins. We want love to win tomorrow. Crossing my fingers. Love's going to win tomorrow. I would love to just thank you, Dr. David Richo, but we'll call him Dave today. Thank you, Dave, for joining us. By the way, I love your content on spirituality. I am so there. So maybe we can have another conversation about that, because that's something that, I do all my spiritual stuff. I do. But
Sure.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Any parting words? And y'all go to his website, Dave Richo, DAVERICHO. So it's a hard K, DaveRicho.com. Go to his website. One more thing before we end, make sure y'all want to know when I go live, text the word love to LOVE, text the word love, everybody, text the word love to 87948, because we need it. We need some love. And before we leave, Mr. Dave, what would you parting words for everybody, and anything you'd like to add?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for having me here. And I just love what you're doing. And I really appreciate being part of it in my own little way. And I guess my final thing is that somehow our relationships can't be just with partners. It has to be that the whole world has become our partner too. So would be a spiritual way of expanding our sense of intimacy.
Yes, absolutely. We have to be intimate with ourselves, each other, and the world. I appreciate that. Thank you, Aisha, for putting the 5 A's. Y'all commit it to giving each other. Now, really, the true answer, give it to your people in our homes, everybody in our homes, with your children, with your loved ones. Let's give each other the 5 A's. I think that if we start there, it will bellow out. People live what they have learned. And also, just to summarize, if you haven't received the 5 A's, it's not over for you. Your history and your past does not have to dictate your relationships in the future. You need to be able to, now we're bringing this up to your conscious awareness so that you can start making the conscious effort to love yourself, give yourself the 5 A's so that you can be whole enough so that you can give that to other people and be in a position where you can also receive it. So it's not over for you just because you've had some challenges in your background. There's no perfect anything. It has to be just good enough. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, David Richo, for joining us. Goodbye, everybody.